Hello, everyone. It is Jennie and Laurie of Astropath, and welcome to today's conversation about Taurus season, which is coming up right around the corner. I don't want to waste a lot of time here, but you know what to do. Subscribe and like and give us comments and all of that. Our information is below if you need it, if you want to contact us for any number of reasons. So, Taurus season. What are we going to start with? Talking about Taurus itself?
Yeah, let's start with talking about the fixed Earth sign of Taurus.
So it is the second sign, which means it is um, the the second piece of spring. It's the stabilizing force of spring. Aries was the beginning of spring. Taurus stabilizes it. This is when we see all the beautiful flowers. And then after this, we'll go into Gemini, which will be the shifting towards summer.
hmm
So it's Earth and it's fixed.
Yeah. And that image of spring, even if you're in the southern hemisphere, that image of spring is really helpful for understanding Taurus because you can do a bunch of things with it. First of all, you can picture this like fertile field, dark soil, ready for little green things to start poking up. So that gives you that's what Taurus is for, holding that equilibrium so life can take root. It also conjures the image of mud, which is one of the kind of the harder things about Taurus, that it doesn't move very quickly, and it can get stuck in the mud. So that brings up that image. And Lori and I always like to talk about these things as a spectrum, and that kind of presents it right there. On one end, you have like can't get out of its own way, bump on the log energy of Taurus. And then on the higher echelon, you have this is the very medium for new life to take root. So you can't get any more powerful than that.
Yeah.
And I do think that for me, I always relate Taurus to Mother Earth, this just grounded, solid, immovable life that really, but yet that needs equilibrium. It is a Venus ruled sign after all. So that's kind of my starting point.
Yeah, it is a Venus ruled sign. It's a very sensual sign. It's a very body oriented sign. It's very, there's a lot of just, yeah, that fixed, that loyalty, that stableness of Taurus. It's a beautiful sign as long as you don't want to move fast
Yes. Yeah.
because it does not move fast.
Yeah, and I think we've already heard us say these words a few times, but that idea of stability,
Mm.
of groundedness, that's the beauty of Taurus, and it is the tangible,
Yeah.
the very tangible component of Venus component here. We are really talking about processes and like, visible, tangible, holdable pieces. And I think that that's a really important piece. I also really like to think about Taurus as our physical bodies and the need of our bodies to have some kind of stasis, to have things not be too disruptive.
Mhm.
It's very important. And so I always think about that quality of groundedness. And every time we have Taurus season, I'm thinking to everybody, calm down, get in your body, like let your emotions rest in your body, like get into that, go outside, look at, nature coming to life in the northern hemisphere, be that like feel your feet on the ground, like all of those really simple things. And that brings you to the sort of highest, my favorite word for the highest manifestation of Taurus is tranquility,
Mhm.
that serenity and tranquility. And it comes with a lot of respect and a lot of like reverence for
Yeah.
nature and for the body and all that it's capable of.
I always think of, yeah, Ferdinand the Bull.
Yes.
No, I mean Taurus is the bull, but it's not the raging bull. It's the calm, steady. You think about that picture on the Ferdinand book cover of the bull sniffing the flower under the tree in springtime, and that is such an image of Taurus. And I also think it's important to think about the Venus rulership and how Venus rules Taurus, and it also rules Libra, and to really understand the difference between those two rulerships. In Libra, Venus is really talking about aesthetic beauty. And in Taurus, it's the sensual side, it's the body side. So that's kind of the difference between how Venus is the ruler of each of those signs.
Yeah, and I remember one of my favorite ways to kind of sum that up is to think about that Libra brings up the issue of choice. It's the balance, the
Mhm.
scales, so this or that. And so when you're thinking about Venus, like Libra's the choice that you make, and then Taurus is the consequences of that
Mm,
choice.
I like that.
And it's the, you see the results, the earthy results of the choices you make. So when you're thinking about Venus in your own chart and its rulership of those two signs, you're thinking about that idea of like understanding your values that Venus represents, the choices you make based on those values, and then the consequences that happen because of the choices you make. And then that causes you to revisit your values. So it
Mhm.
kind of is this process we all need to do. And because we're just coming out of Venus retrograde during this Taurus season, this is the extra important time to really have reflected on that. And also the fact that Taurus comes after Aries. Aries is so hot and ready to go and whoomp, the beginning of the fire, like when you light the kindling and the whole thing just goes up, the rocket ship, and Taurus is like, okay, we need to
Calm
calm
down.
down now. Yes, and there's a big strong signature of that during this Taurus season.
Yeah. This
Yeah,
is a fascinating Taurus season. It really starts out with such a bang.
yeah,
And we need to be paying attention, I think. We ready
yes,
to open up the chart?
yes,
Okay, let's open
yeah.
up the chart of the moment the season begins. So here we have the sun at 0 degrees Taurus.
Hmm.
And yeah, the sun goes into Taurus on April 19th. I don't have the time in front of me. Do you?
No, I do not, but that's okay. I will get it. I did
It
want to
is
comment
at
really quick.
3:55 p.m. in Eastern.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Flip it over. I did want to make one quick comment too, because we were talking about all this tranquility in Taurus, and yes, but Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018. So I just want to comment, like that's part of what's being so churned up for all of us. Like Uranus plowing through Taurus all that time has been the astrology equivalent of like all the tumultuousness we've seen in the world, or a lot of it, especially when it comes to food and resources and money. So I just also wanted to comment on that. Like it's not like it's all being roses and tranquility because having Uranus there has been incredibly disruptive. But it's also waking us up to a new reality. And part of that reality is the relationship we have with our bodies and the earth. So I just felt the need to throw that comment in before we jump into the other stuff.
Yeah. And when we, one of us said that this whole season starts out with such intensity. And,
Hmm.
you certainly don't think of intensity with Taurus. So what is it that is bringing this incredible intensity to the table right now? And you can see that Mars is in a direct, exact square to the sun. Just as the sun steps in, Mars has just stepped into Leo, and we do have this T square going on.
Yeah.
So
So
there's the explosiveness of the season.
yeah, what does this bring, Lori? What do you think of the symbolism of this? What's your kind of keywords for that?
Well, there's sort of an explosion going on. There's a way in which there are things going on that are outside of ourselves that we simply cannot control. And in our conversation before we started the video, Jenny and I were talking about it and just really understanding. I think one of the most important things here is understanding that Mars is in Leo, which is ruled by the sun. So, as Jenny has put it to me, is, Mars is looking to the sun saying, how do I behave in the middle of this huge, tumultuous moment in time, this big explosion that's going on? How do I respond? And what is the sun saying? The sun is saying, get your feet on the ground, go for a walk in the woods, smell the flowers. Not that certainly there are actions that need to be taken for all of us right now in this time. But in order to take those actions from a place that we can maintain our stability, we have to really embody these bodies and put them in places where we can feel that sense of connection to the earth.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's just so interesting always that the zodiac does this thing from yin sign to yang sign and back to yin. So with the sun in a yin sign, It is, it is a message about returning to ourselves, like bring it back into the places you can control, which is, what you put in your body, whether or not you go for a walk, who you talk to that day, all the things that, making choices that help you stay grounded rather than further inflame, whatever's going on. Now, with this setup, you're probably going to encounter things that are inflammatory and make you angry and all of these things. And it's not to say, pretend those don't exist or try to put your head in the sand. It's more just try to bring it back to your body, bring it back to yourself before taking the action, before, because that'll stop you from kind of lashing out and allow you to respond from a conscious place instead of just from reactivity, out of hand. So that's really what this introduces. Mars in Leo though, like Mars likes to be in Leo. It's a
Mhm.
fire sign. It's
Mhm.
it's like cool. I'm finally out of that wretched water sign of Cancer that Mars doesn't love to be in. And I think when Mars is in Cancer, it really was introducing a lot of reactivity, a lot of emotional reactivity. And now I think that is a positive, but it does have to get through this third and final gate with Pluto. And it already has opposed Pluto twice, back in November, right around the U.S. election, and then again, right, I think it was when the Congress was brought in, right before the inauguration in early January. So those are the two oppositions, and this is the final opposition that we're going to see early. So I remember back then thinking, oh, what's this going
Right.
to be? What's this opposition going to be? And I don't know for sure, but we're going to see really soon here because this is what we're coming up on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to mark a point for sure. And it will certainly be connected with those two earlier points.
Yeah. Um, yes. So I think the other thing about this season, so this is like we'll get into the week by week in a minute, and talk a little bit more about that. The other thing I thought was really interesting about this season is recently we've had Mars, Venus, and Mercury all retrograde, and now they're all direct in this chart. And furthermore, they are all out of their shadow period in this chart. So what that means is we really are fully clear. By the time we get to the end of Taurus season, we are clear of all of those retrograde periods and we are humming along and moving forwards, at a faster clip
Mhm.
than what we were before. So I think that's interesting. That kind of represents a sort of waking up out of a process and perhaps experiencing some things moving forwards in a new way,
Mhm.
moving beyond things that started earlier. And just, yeah, I think that'll be an interesting way to experience the energy this
Yeah,
season.
it's so interesting. Neptune has just moved into that Aries, and we have felt that push toward action. And then Venus is going to be going in there as well. Saturn's still going to straggle for a little bit longer in Pisces, but we are really building up into that Aries place. And yet, right now, we've got to settle ourselves.
Yeah.
We're
Yes.
settling ourselves for what's ahead.
Yes. And so we've called this one rebuild from the rubble because, the rubble is sort of like the Mars Pluto in the beginning, the kind of clearing out. Plus that's happening during the balsamic moon. So there's just sort of this clearing out that's happening. And then the rest of Taurus season is about integrating whatever that, because this is a really intense week. And Lori and I are talking, this is one of the most intense weeks of the entire year. And I'm talking about from April 19th till the 26th or 27th, like that week, just because of this opposition. So it's kind of like this thing, it's intense right in the beginning. And then we have this opportunity to kind of recover and integrate what just happened and really delve into those Taurus processes of being in touch with our bodies and being in touch with, the earth beneath our feet,
It,
so.
it's so fascinating. I mean, there's so much going on, and I guess we'll get more into the weeds of it when we get to the week by week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any, I mean, there's obviously other things happening, but I think that's sort of the gist of the season, which is really what this chart's for. Is there anything else we're missing, Lori?
Yeah, I guess I think we'll touch on it all once we get into the other part, into the week by week, the
Okay.
pictures of it. Although I like talking about it while looking at the chart as well, but we don't have both together. So we will clear this out
Okay.
and go to the next. I think I have to say while I'm still looking at
Oh,
this,
do it.
I just think about at the end of the season, the sun is going to conjunct Uranus.
Hmm.
And that's a big wake up call. And I think that's part of our title of something about rebuilding from the rubble. It's like, yeah, there's
Yeah.
this explosiveness that happens at the beginning, and then there's a wake up for what needs to be rebuilt before Uranus goes ahead and moves
Yeah.
into Gemini very soon. And also Pluto is going to turn retrograde in
Yeah.
this. Everything else is moving forward, but Pluto's like, wait a minute, I've got to just back up a little bit before going forward again. And Pluto will stay retrograde for a long time.
Yeah, I'm glad. Thank you for bringing these two in because, yeah, we will talk about them a bit more. But you're right. Like the end of the season is that the sun starting a new cycle, a year-long cycle with Uranus, and like that is, like so. In other words, you're grounding yourself and being in your body, but there's also this like there's a little bit of a new reality that we're realigning ourselves with that sun conjunct Uranus towards the end, and then I was thinking about when Pluto goes retrograde, I was thinking it's like this, like, hold on, I need to go back and do something. And I was just thinking my geeky Lord of the Rings analogy for that is when Gandalf the wizard leaves the group and is like, I have to go and do this other thing. You go on forwards with the whole ring story. I have to go and tend to something else. And it came to mind because I do think Aquarius is a little bit like the wizard. It has that wizardly inventive, there's something different that has to be attended to. And it has to do with going back and there's humanitarianism that's associated with Aquarius. There's technological, things you can think about. But anyway, we'll see what that is. But that was my geeky Lord of the Rings analogy.
I love it when you
Help
bring
me
that
bring
up. I
up.
have no idea what you're even talking about, but I love it that you bring it up. All right, so
Okay, cool.
let's move on. And we're going to have this open here so you can all take a snapshot of it if you want to get a screenshot. So you've got all this in one place because this is all the important things that happen throughout Taurus season.
That's right. Yeah. So we start with day one. Sun enters Taurus, and we have a Mars Neptune trine now in fire signs for the first time connecting in fire signs. So Mars and Leo, Neptune and Aries. That just kind of, yeah, I don't know, that brings an imagination and a wherewithal of like what actions you take. It really sort of says, hey, you're not going to just act for yourself. You're in flow with what the collective need is. And then that day, April 20th, wow, that day has so much going on.
It
That's
sure
a
does.
busy, busy day. So yeah, anyway, we have
It
both.
does. I like these
Yeah.
little sextiles. It's almost like they're
Yeah.
preparing, they're giving us a little bit of understanding of where we are. Right?
Yeah.
There's this explosion going on, but we can kind of see around it. There's opportunities that really allow us to take the action that is necessary instead of just flying into an anger space. I think those sextiles really support doing this in a healthier manner.
I know, and they're aren't they interesting? Like how Venus is in Pisces here, and Uranus is in Taurus. So that one is a more of an internal, like get yourself internally aligned, and then Mars sextile Pluto is almost like okay, and externally aligned. How is your mindset going to align with the collective, movement forward? And the two together, I mean, they're pretty robust, and the sextile is an opportunity. So I like that. And then that's the actual Sun square Mars, where it really is the exact. And so that introduces that it might be tempting to kind of, fly off the handle and be feeling very aggravated, frustrated with the way your life is being disrupted. And we'll talk more about this in the individual impacts, but really it's with Mars being in the sun sign, Mars is looking back at the sun, and it is not, it might be tempting to fly off the handle, but that is not what's actually going to be helpful. What's going to be helpful is the action you take is calm yourself down.
Right.
Like,
Right. And
yeah.
it is interesting. I just as you're saying that, I'm
Mhm.
flashing on that image of Ferdinand the Bull again and thinking about, you know, the bull is so effective in that steady space.
Mhm.
If it gets pushed far enough, though, it's still a bull,
Yeah.
right? So
Yes.
it's not like, I mean, I think the message is very much. steady yourself. The action that needs to be taken is go for a walk in the woods, steady yourself. But at the same time, really understanding that if push comes to shove, if there is something that really, really has to be acted upon, you've got what it takes to do so.
Yeah. And that's true. Taurus is a potent sign. Like it is not to be trifled with. And I do think of that and I think about the planet with that too. Not to be trifled with. These systems are in place for a reason. So yeah, there is something, it's not, you're right, it is, there's something very active about that. It's a square. A square represents a conflict. Mars needs to take action. I think it's more just like do the pause, get really anchored in your body before you make the choice of what action to take, so it's
Yeah,
good.
make the steady choice. I
Yeah.
mean, Taurus is always there's this sense of stubbornness, slowness, but if you poke that bull enough, you're going to see the
You're gonna
strength.
get bored.
Right, right. So, yeah, I like what you said. Yeah, take the pause. Make sure it is a considered action because Taurus does not take action without it being a considered action.
Yeah, you know
Yeah.
and then you fold that into that being a last quarter moon as well, which isn't, I just use the moon phases as kind of looking at like what's the energy flow week by week. And here we are heading towards the dark moon. So the last quarter is that crisis of, meaning, it's the crisis in consciousness. So it isn't, the first quarter square is a crisis of action. I need to act now. The last quarter square is more like a crisis in consciousness. Like, what do I need to let go of? How do I need to release to move forward? So there's still something very active about it, but it also begs that same question of like, how do you need to slow down? Or what do you need to release? And so in this case, there's something about, there's something about I don't know, Aquarius is an air sign, so that kind of introduces the intellect or the mental space here. So it's something about like, I don't know, letting go of preconceived notions or something, or I'm not
Yeah.
sure exactly, but something along those lines
Yeah,
falls
I
into
think
this.
that's what it feels like to me is it's like not getting stuck in what you thought you were going to need to let release at that quarter moon, but really
Yeah.
keeping your eyes open to what it is in light of all these other things.
Yeah, like getting hung up on you expected the future to be a certain way. Well, it's not.
It's not,
And so that Aquarius moon is like letting go of that vision of the future and sinking into the balsamic moon, which the rest of this week, the Sun square Pluto, and then and then towards the end of the week, the Mars opposed Pluto, the Sun square Pluto is saying you've got to let something transform. And again, we're in the balsamic moon. So you've got to, there's a lot of letting go. There's something about skeletons coming out of the closet here, something being unearthed or dug up that you have to kind of deal with.
yeah. And
Yeah.
as you're saying that, I'm thinking, what is it? What are those skeletons in the closet? They very well may be really attached to the ideas of what your expectations were.
Yeah.
That your presumed and assumed privilege in the world.
Right. Right. Because there is something about Pluto and Aquarius too that somebody said the word equalizer to me. And when things start, the whole thing starts moving up and down and jolting along, there is an equalizing effect where suddenly the people who've always had less, well, there's more people joining that, who now have less because of something. So that's just a that's a bit of a reality. I mean, Aquarius is also a reality. It's a Saturn ruled sign. Pluto's in Aquarius. So there's something about all of those pieces. And being in the balsamic moon is a symbol for having to kind of to see what emerges and surrender to it. There's a surrendering that's happening. But I'm very pleased that
But
Venus has chosen.
before you go on to Venus conjunct Saturn, I'm sorry,
No, sorry. Good.
these
Yeah.
thoughts are just popping in my mind, and I want to go back for a split second
Hmm.
and re-engage that Venus sextile Uranus and Mercury sextile Pluto,
Mm.
because those two planets have been retrograde. They were just back in motion, and they are both in this opportunity relationship with these outer planets.
Mhm.
This really speaks to, as we are seeing what is crumbling around us, as we are being equalized, as we are having to let go of certain expectations and ideas that we had, we do have the support of there are larger forces that are supporting us at the same time.
Yeah, and just like you just said, because those have just come off retrograde, Venus and Mercury, we also have a storehouse of information in each of us that we have gathered through that retrograde. That's what the retrogrades do. They force you to go back and reflect on the other pieces, and then when they move back forwards, they're coming back with a new, with a basket full of new things, new ideas, new values, new mindsets, and so you have an opportunity to use that to help you through this week and help this is such a potent week.
Yeah,
So
it
yeah, it's
really
great.
is. So
Yep.
then back to where you were trying to go when I pulled you back.
Yep.
Venus conjunct Saturn. I
Hmm.
love that.
Yeah, well, yeah, say more. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just love that for this particular week because it's such a volatile week. Venus and Saturn are friends. Let's be clear. Um, Venus really represents values and Saturn represents stability. When they come together, this is the beginning of a basically a year-long cycle of stabilizing our beliefs, our values, what's important to us. This is a time of really getting clear as we're releasing all this stuff. Well, what is important to us? Where do we, um, where do our values really need to be held strong and worked with?
Yeah. I know there's a nice sort of it's like a cementing,
Yeah,
bringing Venus and, it's both in Pisces. So there's just like bringing those things together. And Saturn brings as you said, like a stability and a boundaries essentially.
yeah,
So Venus conjunct Saturn is sort of, um, yes, for some reason, the word cementing is coming to
yeah.
mind, both in Pisces there. But anyway, this is the third time that Venus has
Mm,
joined Saturn. It joined it before and then it did its retrograde, and this is the final pass. So there's something deeper, there's a longer, deeper process you've been involved in that ultimately is going to stabilize anything to do with these issues. So these might be relationships in your life, these might be certain financial pieces you've been dealing with. It might have to do with other resources or other possessions. There's a lot of different pieces that you're now like, okay, now you know where you are.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And then we have ta-da, the kind of
Ta-da.
the main event, which is just being talked about by many astrologers, and but the final pass of Mars opposing Pluto. And again, this time it's the second time it's Leo and Aquarius. I think the first one was that, and then it was
Yeah,
Cancer and
yeah.
Capricorn again. And then like so it's just like yeah, so interesting. And now it's here we are in Leo in
Oh,
Aquarius.
yeah. I mean, what does this mean? This is wrapping up a story that began at the first time it passed, which was a few days before, I think it was the day before the election.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Um, hmm. Should have
Yeah,
gone
very
back to find the date of when Mars conjuncted Pluto, but at any rate, this is part of the story that has been being told since the election.
hmm
This is
Yeah.
a powerful one.
Yeah, so it's like that, and then the second one was right when the new Congress started, and right before the inauguration, and so here we have this final pass, like, and there's a lot in here. I mean, Mars and Pluto just by itself is an explosive combination. I mean, it's Mars is the one that wants to take action, and Pluto's like, well, let's decimate. Let's just,
Let's
let's
destroy.
flatten everything. Annihilation. There's an annihilation, but the purpose of it is not to be destructive. The purpose is to annihilate so new structures can be built. And this is part of the cyclical knowledge that we as humans know we've used for all the time we've been on this planet. We've had the cyclical knowledge, and only in this culture have we tried to deny that and try to make it all linear. But this is a cycle. of that. And so, yes, it's intense as individuals, like, oh my God, what is this? But it's also how these cycles work. And also, things do need to shift. And we don't, I think there's a big symbol here of we're not in charge.
But it's
We're on a
also
freight train. So, yeah.
also interesting how this is happening, this final opposition between the two of them is happening the day before the new moon.
Right. And that's
Now,
such a great keynote of
it's
this
a
whole thing.
dark, this is a happening in the darkness.
Yeah, and that's why it brings in this really cathartic sort of feeling. Like, what is underneath that has been problematic, that needs to be transformed, that needs to be dug up, and it's digging it up right for the new moon. So it's this really fertile, it's bringing up all of these like ancient nutrients that have been like packed down and way down there, and it's like bringing it up. And that's what's I find is such the keynote of this Taurus cycle, because then, right, you have the new moon the very next day, like a new start. Just that is so powerful, I think, for this season. And it's so fascinating to me that's really right at the end of the moon cycle, because it really localizes it in all of our lives and in a very sort of tangible way, because it's Taurus, new moon. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So for all of you listening, make sure to note where that new moon is happening, 7 degrees Taurus. That's where the new cycle is going to begin. And then we head into a much quieter week.
Yeah. I just think so much of the rest of Taurus season, other than the very end, which we'll get to, is very much about how do we integrate? How do we integrate whatever happened? Like what happened? What got stirred up? How do we, again, and how do we know that? By tuning into our bodies. How do we know? And spending the rest of the time and it's interesting how these first 2 days after the Taurus new moon, Venus is still in Pisces. Venus is the ruler of that new moon. And then she goes into Aries. So now she's saying, okay, you've been activated. You've had this chance to really do the Pisces work, the inner healing, the recognition of grief, and all of these things. And now she's like, it's on.
Now it's on. Now it's
Yeah.
time for action. Yeah,
Yeah. And then she immediately has a meeting on May 2nd with
with
this,
Neptune.
yeah.
So then the question is, okay, I am ready to take action. And what do I need to consider with this action? I need to consider these deeper levels of knowing that come through Neptune, through a spiritual understanding or, something in that realm. You can't leave yourself behind and just go all Aries warrior because, well, you can, but it has to be from that space of the spiritual warrior, which I think we've talked about in other videos.
Yeah, it's just that if you don't do that, you're not doing it from a conscious space. And part of the whole point of everything we're going through right now is getting more connected, is being connected with each other, ourselves, the collective and so on. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And then you have that first quarter moon in Leo, which kind of I don't know, it's a little bit of reiterating the Leo's, the sun in quiet Taurus and the moon in Leo, wanting recognition, wanting, things to be dramatic. And Pluto stations retrograde that day. So that's that whole thing of where some part is saying, we're not ready to fully move forward. So I'm going to go back and do the necessary work. The rest of you keep going. The rest of you keep moving forward. I have to go back. It really has that feeling to it. And since it's Pluto, it's slow and this is part of its normal retrograde cycle. So, and then we
Going
kind of
to
have some
remain throughout its retrograde. It's not going back into Capricorn anymore, and we're grateful for that. After all those years of it dancing back and forth, we're not going there again. So it's going to remain in Aquarius. So we're going to be revisiting those intellectual levels of our humanitarian understanding.
yes. And then we have this funny little pair of sextiles again, different ones this time. And so we have Mercury sextile Jupiter. That's something, Mercury's in Aries, Jupiter's in Gemini. There's something about connecting through conversation, like having those bigger discussions, like drawing people in, drawing people together to sort of work on what actions to take. Something about that. And then and Venus, also in Aries, but sextiling Pluto and Aquarius. So that brings in, again, these like more collective forces. So it's interesting how both of these points are still in these both Mercury and Venus are in Aries, so this very independent space, but connecting with collective forces.
You know what else it does?
Mm.
This is really excites me because it's so easy in the world today for us to get very negative about where things are going and
Yeah.
scared and all the rest of it. But this really, I just realized that what we're seeing here is we've got the sextile to Uranus, Venus doing a sextile to Uranus, a conjunction to Neptune, a sextile to Pluto. It is reminding us or leading us to notice what is going to be happening over the next couple of years, which is that Pluto and Uranus are going to be in a trine aspect with Neptune right at the midpoint,
Mm-hmm.
sextiling each of them. And I think, I mean, when I look ahead, I feel pretty positive
Mm-hmm.
about, we're not going into a dark pit forever. There is hope ahead. And I think it's in that exact configuration. And during this Taurus season, we are seeing a glimpse of that.
Yes, and and when you bring in the fact that they're all sextiles, what you bring in is the idea that this is why it's important, whoever's listening to this video and learning things in other ways too, like to that it's an opportunity that you need to take advantage of. It's not, you don't sit on the couch and have it happen. You got to reach for it. But it's that reaching, but that's actually the true definition of hope really brings in action. It isn't just sitting on the sofa wishing for the best, right? It's
Right.
actually taking action to make connections with other people, to make positive connections, to look at what really needs to happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's important.
Yeah. And that's why it's like, yes, I feel hopeful. And we all have to do our part
Yes. There's
because it's
nothing. Yeah.
textiles. It's sextiles. We have to take the actions to engage the opportunities.
Yeah.
So we have to get out there and do our part, whatever it is, to get us out of this
Yeah. And
current place we're at.
there's so many ways. I mean, it's how we treat each other. It's how you talk to people and that you don't even know. It's what choices you choose to make on a daily basis. How do you behave at work? What do you choose to buy? Who are you supporting through your money? Etc. I mean, every choice that you make has an impact. And if everybody starts considering these things, it's a tremendous, that's how everything shifts,
Yeah.
right? That is the thing of change. And so it's just interesting. We're waxing up to the full moon at this point too. So pretty quiet after those sextiles, and then Mercury enters Taurus. So now Mercury's saying, all right, I'm ready to get into that tangible mindset. I've been in Aries, really focused on getting things started and blast off. And now it's time to go ahead and like let my mind slow down and really think about the practicality of decisions that need to be made and think about the impacts of decisions, the consequences of decisions that need to be made. So I think that's Mercury likes to move quicker than Taurus allows it to, but it's also really healthy for Mercury to slow down sometimes.
I think so too. I
Yeah.
think so too. And then we get into the next week, and Mercury has to go through the gauntlet that the sun went through earlier in the season. So Mercury squares Pluto, but that's like the same day as the full moon, which is at 22 degrees Scorpio. We will be doing a video about that full moon, I believe.
Yes.
So we will kind of dig deeper into what that moment in time is really about.
Yes. Yeah. And just in essence, it's like a Scorpio full moon is going to direct you to some internal processes. I mean, this is a yin full moon, so you're going to be looking at the impact of all of these pieces, and how that intersects with your own personal wounding and what you need to do for healing. That's what that full moon brings in, at least from my perspective. And yeah, and then Mercury reiterating the square. And then the rest of that week again, like there's these spots of the moon is cruising around, but you're just going with, there's a lot of space in this month for integration, which I like to see. And because then you have that next major thing that Lori had mentioned earlier, the sun conjunct Uranus. So this,
Wake up.
yeah, this is a wake up. But it's a wake up to, it's a year long cycle. Sun is going to conjunct Uranus every year, and it's a year long, it's a new opportunity, really. It's like breaking new ground. Like, what do you need to take on board as part of our new reality, as you really consider the Taurus
And I don't know, in regards to Uranus going into Gemini and then doing a kind of back and forth for a while. I don't know if this is the last time that Saturn conjuncts Uranus in Taurus or not. Should have checked that. But
That's right. We can put notes in the bottom of the chart too, because I don't know, because Uranus is going to go into Gemini and then it's going to dip back in Taurus briefly. But I don't have those dates off the top
yeah,
of my
I'm not sure. I'm not
head.
sure. At any rate,
And then Mercury squares Mars, so that's two, and that's a little bit different because it's two of the personal planets scoring each other. It's still some sort of test, some sort of stress test on your mindset there. There could be a tendency towards some kind of aggravation, or sometimes also Mars can be, for some reason, the word injury came to mind. Like, so just paying attention to that's a little bit of a hot day, a good day to really just kind of take it easy, not push yourself too far. Don't push yourself beyond whatever your body's telling you. I see that. Um, and then and then the last thing that happens is parting little shot. You've got the Sun sextile Saturn, which is a really nice finish
probably.
to the season. I like that. Just like, again, that opportunity of like, okay, we were just in Taurus, just check back in with the Pisces, the sort of the emotional temperature of the collective. And then we have, right before the sun enters Gemini, a second last quarter moon in Aquarius. So a second opportunity to let go of your expectations for the future so that something else can come in. So
That's
interesting.
interesting to have, on the 20th of April, that last quarter moon at 1 degree Aquarius, and on the 20th of May, the last quarter at 29 degrees Aquarius. It's like
Yeah.
both those points.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice end. It's a nice end to the season. So I think we've covered everything going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And we are ready to jump into the individual impacts. Anything else we want to say before we do that?
No, feel like we've blathered on quite enough.
I think we probably have. So let's talk about for folks with Aries rising. The Taurus season is really focusing your attention on your second house. So this is where you're really um, the second house really speaks to issues of self-worth, self-esteem, money, resources, all of that those things are very connected. We feel best about ourselves. Our self-esteem is doing well when we feel comfortable when it comes to our money and resources. So this is an area that those of you with Aries rising really expect and anticipate a lot of stability in this area of your lives. It's an important area to have stable for you. And that's where the focus is. Now, the stress, the action, the what is feeling kind of out of control in your life is something around community and well, it's something around how you give of yourself and how you receive from community. There's some stress in that area. We've put Mars in here just because at the very beginning of the season, it's exactly in that square aspect to the sun. So, what do you have to say, Jenny? Because I feel like I'm missing what I was supposed to say.
Well, I think part of this is the idea is that the Mars Pluto opposition that we talked about at length, that is not a place where we really have a whole lot of control. I feel like that's sort of like a generational disruption, or things that are beyond our control. There's a lot about our society is sort of like on a freight train right now. And so I think there's something in which that out of control feeling, or whatever it is creating a disruption in that axis between your fifth and your 11th house. And as Laurie's saying, like, that's the place where you give of yourself and how you receive. So there's just disruption. I mean, some of it could be something like, let's just give some examples. For example, maybe you have children and there's something going on with your children's school, and you don't have any control over what's happening with your children's school, and so your child is kind of like, becoming really dysregulated, let's say, and looking to you saying, oh my God. And so your job is to say, okay, I don't have control over that, but what I do have control over is regulating myself, making sure I'm doing self-care so I'm available for my child who feels very disrupted. I mean, this is an example, but this is exactly what's going on, is the idea that there's something about your creative processes, the way you give of yourself, the risks that you want to take, all that sort of thing that feels out of control. And you just kind of have to say, whoa, let me get back to how I value myself. Let me get back to where I know I feel secure in this moment inside my body, and slow down so that we can weather this change that's going to impact, both in the creative processes and also in my community. So I'm thinking something along those
Your
lines.
community art center might have just closed down and you have no control over it. And yeah, what you need to do is give your money to that organization.
Or
There's so many ways to think about this.
or like buy art supplies and have some kids come over to your house and
Right.
start, it is exactly that sort of response we're looking for, not just doing nothing but slowing down enough to make an informed response and think about what you can control versus getting thrown off by what you can't.
Exactly. That's great. Okay, let's move on to folks who have Taurus rising. This is personal, huh?
Right. Okay, so those of you with Taurus rising, like this is a Taurus season really brings the focus right onto you. This is so think about the self and your relationship to yourself. And part of that is going to be, your self-awareness. Like how aware are you as a sort of Taurus person? Are you aware of your perhaps your profound need or even your attachment to stability, to things staying the same? Just asking those questions and then understanding yourself as you are an important person, in terms of stabilizing other people. You're walking around with this Taurus energy forefront. Like you have, no matter what else you have going on in your chart, you have the ability to really bring that calm, anchoring, supportive component to anything. So don't forget about that during this Taurus season, because the other thing we've put on here is Mars, in your fourth house. And as we talked about at length, Mars is going to be doing a very explosive contact to Pluto early on in the season. And so, for those of you with Taurus rising, that is a symbol for disruption in your home life and in your public life. Maybe that's your career, or maybe that's just how you show up in public. There's something happening on the world stage or in your community, or something that is affecting you that's beyond your control. And it's probably not very comfortable, and it would be really tempting to kind of freak out and just and do, like, Mars is in the fourth house, maybe do something rash around your home, like, oh my god, I gotta sell my house or something. But that's not the best solution. What you need to consider is, because we're in Taurus season and Mars is in Leo, so Mars is looking over at the sun being like, hey sun, how do I do this? And the sun is saying, calm down, get into your body, get anchored, get an understanding of who you are as a person, as a tranquil person, and then make some conscious decisions about what you need to do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, yeah.
That's great. I like thinking of just examples, something out of control between your career, between your social reputation and your home. And I think before earlier, I was thinking of it in terms of, you lost your job, no fault of your own. You have to go home and tell your family. And what do? Yes, you go into that space where you can just bring that stability and that comfort, and take deliberate, thoughtful action instead of just, falling off the roof or whatever, you know, having a fit. But yeah, it's interesting to think about this way. This is something that is out of your control, and what you can do is find your own inner stability. Get a massage. Just get a massage.
Mm, nice. Yeah.
All right,
This,
let's move. What
yeah, I
else?
was just going to make one other comment too. Like, just think about how that plays out. Like, maybe you're being activated in a new way in your vocational life, and how's that? It doesn't matter which direction it is, whether, but what matters is what you do, the grounding. and then you'll know what to do.
Right. How we respond to this is what matters. And the sun in Taurus is telling us to respond very deliberately and slowly and with eyes wide open. Okay.
Nice.
Whoops, Gemini. Let's
Hey.
talk about Gemini rising. So, for those of you with Gemini rising, Taurus season is highlighting your 12th house. So, people with it's interesting. People with Gemini rising kind of show up in the world as kind of chatty and friendly and outgoing, and yet their steadfastness is so solid in that hidden the 12th house, the unconscious, the inner patterns of how they think. There's a real steadiness there. And that's where the focus is at this point in time during this season. Now, we've put Mars here because as this season begins, Mars is really demanding that we take action, that we take action on something that is really out of our control in regards to the third and ninth house polarity, which really relates to how we use our voice to talk about our worldview. This is really a simple one because this really, as a very simple um, example, there is something going on in the outer world that is infuriating you and you're ready to, burst a seam and scream and yell about it. But Mars, because it's in the sign of Leo, which is ruled by the sun, Mars is saying to the sun, how do I respond to this? And the sun is saying, you've got to slow down. You still have to take action, but you need to slow down and consider very carefully what your action is, not just blow off with a big dramatic, um, yeah. You want to really slow down and go into this very quiet place where you can find stability and consider what your actions are going to be and then move on from there.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's very important this time for Gemini rising people because I do think of Gemini as having something to do with the nervous system. And
Mm.
with Taurus in your 12th house, I think there's a real need for taking care of your health on a profound level. So, not just your physical body, but also your sort of spiritual health and like making sure that you are doing what you need to do to release stress. And I just think there's so much uh, cool stuff coming about somatic experiencing, and so that is the idea of like how do things feel in your physical body? And with those of you with Taurus in the 12th house, this is a very important time to really experience things in your physical body and let that lead you into a deeper spiritual practice or viewpoint or whatever you want to call it. I think that that is part of the message here. And so there's a real need to be sensitive to this and tune into it and don't ignore it. It could be easy to ignore because it's in the 12th house, but it will have profound impacts if you do that, and that will help you understand how to use your voice constructively. And that actually you've got a great deal of power because Pluto is in your ninth house. So you of all people are very important to shaping a new world view. And so the more that you can regulate yourself, the better off you're going to be and more effective you're going to be at doing that for other people.
It's like
So yeah.
people with Gemini rising really require, yeah, attention to their mental health.
Hmm.
Massage, get a massage, go out for a walk. You got to really keep those kind of things that settle you mentally and emotionally, walking in the woods.
Yeah, I'm glad you.
Forest bathing. All
Yeah.
of you with Gemini rising, forest bathing is your prescription while you contemplate the actions you're going to take with your voice about what you see going on in the world.
Mm, love it. Fantastic. That's
All right.
exactly it.
Going on to those with Cancer rising.
All right, so if you have Cancer rising, let's just start out with where Taurus season lands for you, like it always does. It's always illuminating your 11th house of community. So this is a really important time for you to contemplate all things community. Who are your communities? Who do you share group space with? where do you feel supported by community? What kind of group practices might you be involved in? And with Taurus there, yeah, it does bring in the physical body. Like, how do you move your body with groups of people? I mean, it really kind of brings it down to that. So very easy for me to think about. I mean, this is mine, so it's very easy to think about a yoga practice, moving the physical body, or joining like a cycling club and getting out on the bike because it's almost time here in Vermont. Not quite yet, but close.
Ecstatic dance.
Yeah, ecstatic dance. In fact, I have an invitation for that. Exactly, like moving your body in groups, very important. So that's kind of the highlight. Meanwhile, we have included Mars in these charts because there is that super intense Mars-Pluto opposition right at the beginning of the season that is then re-triggered later in the season by Mercury. So it's really important to understand that there's another part of your life that's going to feel pretty out of control. And with Mars in the second house, that certainly brings up issues of perhaps money, your possessions, or things maybe not being worth what you thought they were before. And at the same time, Pluto's over there in your eighth house. So that's other people's money and other people's resources and everything else. So, so that axis feels out of control. There's big forces moving that there's nothing you can do about. You can't, if you have stock, you can't do anything about like what's happening in the stock market right now. There's nothing you do. So the better thing to do is with Mars there, you still are being required to take some kind of action. But Mars is looking at the sun because it's in Leo. So Mars is like, what do I do? And what you do is you really lean into those communities. This is a very important time to reach out to other people and feel into those places where you feel very anchored with other people. Like, how can you create that we have this whole theme of tending to fertile ground. You got to tend to the fertile ground in your community if you have Cancer rising. So that's kind of the gist. But Laurie, what do you have to add?
No, I think you covered that really well. I'm just thinking about, what the action is that you're required to do. Clearly, you have to stabilize yourself and make sure it's a very considered action. But what would the action be? It's coming out of this place where you don't have control, and
Mm-hmm.
yet you have to take action with your money in some way. Perhaps it's time for people with Cancer rising to, invest in their local community. If
Yeah.
if they can make some changes in their portfolio or whatever, people have that, yeah, there's a suggestion here that that could be what is needed. But you've got to really consider it and deepen your connection with the community before you're really clear of what action to take.
Yeah, and it might involve, because it's the second house, it might involve some sort of like uptick in self-confidence. Like you might have to have the confidence to say, "Ooh, I'm gonna connect with that group. I've been really nervous to, but now it's time." There's some piece about that too.
Yeah.
But I love what you said about the local resources. Yeah, like getting involved in local community, perhaps pulling,
Yeah. Giving
money out of
your
big
resources. I mean, it doesn't have to be money, it can be, but your inner resources and really investing that in community that will help you really understand in a clearer manner how you need to be responding and reacting moving forward.
assets.
That's lovely. Okay, let's move on to folks who have Leo rising. If you have Leo rising, Taurus season is highlighting your 10th house, which Taurus season every year highlights your 10th house. 10th house is the house that relates to your career, your vocation, your social reputation. Just, it's the highest point in the chart. It is where you are seen out in the world. And for those of you with Leo rising, you show up in the world with a pretty dramatic, um, extroverted kind of a personality. And yet, when it comes to your career, your social reputation, this is a place where you really want a lack of drama. You really want this to be a place of great stability and value in your life. So that's where the focus is at this point in time. As we have put Mars here, because Mars is in an exact square as the sun moves into Taurus, but we also know that Pluto is exactly opposite that Mars. So what we're looking at is something that is really out of your control happening in your most personal, probably relationships. It could be a spouse that we're talking about. It could be, any one-on-one kind of contractual relationship. It may be you just hired somebody to do some build on your property, and that contractor would be a contractual relationship. So it doesn't have to be a spouse. I just want to make that clear. It
Yeah.
can be, your therapist, your astrologer, whoever. But there's some way in which a relationship and how that person responds to you, there's something that feels very out of your control. And yet Mars is saying, and that's its square aspect to the sun, I have to take action. And you can imagine that being feeling very heated, especially right there in your first house. You want to take action. You want to, go to war here with this person, and it might be your spouse. Um, but because Mars is in Leo, ruled by the sun currently in Taurus, Mars is asking the sun in Taurus for advice on how to respond. And the sun in Taurus is saying, go to work, go to your job, go to your place in public where you can find some stability that kind of gives you a different perspective on this little battle between you and someone else. And from there, you can find a more constructive way of responding.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, I love everything you've said. Great. And I think what I'll add is just a simple idea that, yeah, Mars cruising through your first house is very activating. And part of the job here for you is that with Leo rising, like you are a beacon for other people. Like that's the most radiant sign. And so part of the job of anyone with Leo rising is to just let that beacon shine so other people, know how to move forward. So I think the real thing would be and want that tricky balance of like, is there an action that is actually selfish, that you don't really want to take, but at the same time, you want to self actualize so that you do light up, so you shine a light. So I think it's a subtle distinction of like, well, not acting out of just pure anger without any consideration, but just activating and just sort of lighting up. And it's just that fine line of you walking your path. You're not being selfish, but at the same time, taking an action that is something that aligns with yourself. So that there's something about that, like balancing.
Yeah, that brought in a more positive way of looking at it, I think, than what I was doing. Yeah. Anyway, I think we've covered that. Let's go
Yeah.
on to Virgo rising.
All right, so those of you who have Virgo rising, let's just start with where the Taurus sun is landing, as it does every Taurus season. And for you, that's the ninth house, which is really nice. I mean, means that every Taurus season, there's some way in which your worldview is being lit up. There's something for you to contemplate and consider about the way you view the world. It also might be, I mean, the ninth house is a very active house. It's really an extension of your self expression. So it's the experiences that you gather throughout your life that form your life philosophy, essentially. So with the sun shining here, that's what's got your attention. What's your life philosophy? How does that tie in with the physical body? How does that tie in with, the desire to have a very sort of anchored and calm overall philosophy of life? Like, how do you maintain your equilibrium in this part? So that's what the main thing to think about is with the sun here. Now, we've also included Mars in these charts. You see Mars there in the 12th house, and Mars has opposed Pluto. And we extensively talked about this in the beginning. And where Mars is opposing Pluto in anybody's chart represents a place that just doesn't feel in control. Like it's not in your control. It's something that's happening. The world is changing, all these things are happening, these are big events, and so there's a out of control feeling that represents. And for you, that's happening across the 12th and the 6th house. So the 12th house is the most hidden from view, so there's an unconscious process perhaps that's being stirred up by what's happening in the world. And Pluto, meanwhile, is in your 6th house of your lifestyle and your routines. So the two together are kind of churning up. Quite honestly, it could be something to do with health. But it also has to do with overall like your practices and then your higher beliefs, your spiritual beliefs about the way the world is. And there's something really being rattled in both of those places. And Mars is a very active planet and it's in a square with the sun. So Mars has to take some sort of action. And the danger here is that action could be rather destructive if it wasn't really considered, if it lashed out from, some deep unconscious place, it could be quite destructive. But the idea here really is that you want to really lean into the Taurus area, lean into your overall life philosophy, lean into your overall very grounded worldview. And from that place, make a decision about how you want to operate from that Mars place. Make a decision about, I don't know, like looking deeper into subconscious processes, confronting some kind of, mental or spiritual health issue that you haven't been able to deal with in the past, to really just, you know, grapple with that. Maybe you need to take your whole spiritual thing into a deeper direction. Maybe there's something else that you need to support you in that, and to make you be able to handle these changes that feel so out of control, in a better manner. So I don't know. What do you have to add, Lori? You might know something about this one.
Well, it's interesting because I really just sitting here listening to you because yeah, this is mine and thinking about that Mars Pluto and that what's felt out of control for me because this, and suddenly I'm thinking of it as the whole period of time with that Mars Pluto back and forth, back and forth. And that has been the entire scope of time that I've been struggling with trying to recover from this knee replacement surgery, which has been brutal for me. So I
Mm.
think this is the way I'm going to look at this is, I mean, I've got to think about it more, but I really see this as wrapping up the story of what I've gone through with this. And the action being, yeah, it's some way of doing a deeper look, really looking deeper and allowing, when I think about that ninth house, I'm thinking also about teaching and, the
Mm.
people you encounter who teach you, even as you're teaching them, perhaps, it's that reciprocal, what happens in experience where we really gain and give. I don't know,
Mm.
going off on a tangent, I think.
Oh, it's
But
good. Yeah.
I think that the action to take is to turn to your, yeah, your higher beliefs and find that stable place, whether that stable place can be a place. It could be an experience, a place
Mhm.
where you provide or receive experience.
Right. I can't help but think, Lori, too, like with it being Taurus in the ninth house, it's like, what have you learned from your body in the last 6 or 7 months? Like, what is the wisdom that your body has brought you? And how are you going to occupy the space when you're in your body teaching other people? How are you occupying space? You
Yeah.
know?
It's fascinating. It's
Yeah.
fascinating. So thank you, Jenny. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Folks with Libra rising, the Taurus season is bringing the bulk of its focus into your eighth house. Now, the eighth house is a very deep area. People with Libra rising kind of show up on the scene as the peacemakers with, diplomatically trying to keep everyone happy around them. And, part of the ability to do that is that there's this ability to stay stable in the face of other people's stuff. The eighth house really is, it's where we share values with others, where we encounter the values of others. You can think of that house in all kinds of ways, the baggage that we have to navigate, other people's baggage that we have to navigate. But people with Libra rising really have the ability to do that with a lot of stability. Um, so that's where the Taurus focus is. Now, the piece that is probably feeling really out of control right now comes in the polarity where we give and receive. We've got Mars here because as the season begins, there's a exact square going on between the Sun and Mars. So there's some way in which your community, you may be feeling aggravated, some sort of there's some activation around your community and an activation around how you give of yourself that feels really out of control. Maybe you just don't feel like what you give is appreciated, or there's some manner that you don't have control of what's going on in that area.
Mm.
And Mars going into your 11th house, you could get all kinds of drama activation here. But because Mars is in Leo, Mars is asking the Sun, the ruler of Leo, how to behave in this moment. And the Sun is in Taurus saying, don't fly off the handle. Don't go into big drama mode in your community. Stay steady, get into that space where you can navigate the deepest levels of each individual in that community and stay there for a while before you make a decision of how to react or respond within the context of the whole community.
Mm.
Community is made up of individuals, and you, with Libra rising, have a unique ability to navigate those depths of people.
Mm. Yeah, I think what comes to my mind too as you're talking about all this is just that the eighth house suggests the need to just trust your ability. With Taurus here, you have the ability to stay grounded no matter what comes at you from other people. And you just need to get in touch with it. You just need to get in touch with that, what you already have. So there's a sort of a relinquishment, a trust that, no, I got this. I can set a really good, nice, healthy, stable boundary, and it doesn't have to be a wall. It can just be a nice boundary, and to trust that. I think that really comes to mind. And the second thing I really think about with this one is both Libra and Taurus are ruled by Venus. So whoever has this one, make sure you check where Venus is in your own chart
Mhm.
and just reflect on that. What is Venus doing? What sign is she in? What house is she in, etc. Think about that, because that's also going to give you a key to how can you do that. What's important for you to do that. So I just wanted to add that piece, but I think everything else great.
Okay, we're moving on now to those with Scorpio rising.
Okay, so if you have Scorpio rising, Taurus season always ends up lighting up your seventh house, the seventh house of others. That's the simplest term way to put the seventh house, because it really is. If you look at the first house itself, the seventh is the exact mirror opposite. So we're looking at all other people in your life. So you can think about one-on-one connections with people. You can think about your spouse if you have one, business partnerships. Also, like if you're a tennis player, your rival is also a seventh house situation. So all of those things are seventh house. So we can probably all think of multiple places for that. So for those of you with Scorpio rising, despite having this intense water sign as your rising sign, you really need a lot of quiet and stability, and groundedness in your main partnerships or in your connections with other people. That's what this suggests. And when the sun is here during the season, it really lights that up. It lights up this whole idea of, when you connect with other people, you're doing it from this very Taurus place, this place of stillness and tranquility and wanting things to be on an even keel, which is, well, the opposite of your Scorpio rising. So it's really interesting to think of that. So start with that in your mind. And then this Taurus season is very different than any other in the sense that we have a Mars Pluto opposition at this time, and it's the third one because Mars has been retrograde. So that opposition is taking place in your fourth and 10th house, and what it represents is a way perhaps in which you feel completely out of control. I mean, things that are happening beyond your control are happening in these places. The fourth and the 10th house is your family and your public life, or very simply, your private and your public life. And there's something that is being stirred up by current events, by all the changes that are happening in the world, and you just don't have control over all of this. There might be some pieces you do, but there's a lot that you don't. So what is happening is that you kind of have to deal with that. And how are you going to deal with that? Well, we've put Mars in these charts specifically because Mars is in your 10th house. And so you may be feeling like you really need to take some kind of action right now, right here, right now in your very public life. And while it is true that you need to take an action, the part that's not true is the doing without any kind of preconsidered thought. And so Mars is in a square with the sun. It's looking to the sun because the sun rules Leo and Mars is in Leo. And it's saying, hey, sun, what do I need to do? And the sun is saying, well, first, you need to get grounded and you need to stabilize in your connections with other people. And now that doesn't mean you're trying to get everyone around you to calm down. What it's doing is saying you need to be calm as you approach other people. That if you can slow down and pause and get more grounded in your body and say, and take a deep breath, and then, move forwards with an action, that's what it is saying. I mean, that's kind of the pathway that we're looking at. So yeah, Lori, what do you have to add?
Yeah, people with Scorpio rising gain a lot of their stability through their relationships, their close relationships. And so I mean, that's where you need to kind of go and have those conversations, maybe those connections with others that are going to really help you to just stabilize yourself in the face of this incredibly stressful time that you don't feel like you can make sense of possibly what's happening in the outer world and how it's impacting your family. You can imagine a million different ways that this might be playing out in different people's lives. But what you really need to do is find that stability and then deal with the situation from a place of really considered action. Yeah, it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not easy, but
No, not easy, but
yeah.
simple to say, not easy to do.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to folks who have Sagittarius rising. People with Sagittarius rising, the Taurus season is really focusing its attention in your sixth house, which is your day-to-day routines, how you care for yourself, how you manage your day-to-day life. So that's, for people with Sagittarius rising, which are all, Sagittarius rising people are all explorers and adventurers, and yet they tend to really resonate with the need for stable routine practices in their lives. So this is where the focus of Taurus season is. Right now, we've added Mars up there, which is falling in your ninth house. And there's an opposition that's been going on 3 times since last November. And this is the final time that it's doing this opposition. There is some way in which there's been just energy that feels out of your control when it comes to the outer world, your worldview, how you communicate about your worldview. This is a place where there's been a lot of stress. And you haven't really known how to deal with it. So now at this square with Mars, Mars wants to take action. Mars is really ready to do something about this tension and take action in the worldview, in some outer manner. Mars doesn't quite know how to do that action. It wants to do something dramatic, but because it's in Leo, which is ruled by the sun, it has to get the sun's permission before it can do anything. And the sun is really telling Mars to slow down and really refocus the attention on those routines. What is it that I can do every day as a routine practice that will support my ability to take action? I do have to take action in regards to my worldview, but I need to consider it carefully on the meditation cushion
Mhm.
before I take the action.
Yeah.
Or, it doesn't have to be a meditation cushion. You might want to contemplate it deeply while you wash the dishes. Whatever it is, in that space of your steady, stable routines, that's where you will find the stability to kind of give you the idea of what it is you need to take action on, the considered
Yeah.
action.
Yeah, and I was also thinking as you're talking, this I know this happens to both of us. I was getting this feeling of like Pluto going in the third house. Of one of the things that could make it feel like is to feel stifled. Like somehow the changes in society are making this heaviness, like, oh, and you feel like the oxygen's being sucked out of your lungs. I could really see that. That's not the only way it would necessarily could present, but just it just really sunk in that way. And that Mars up in the ninth house is like, I need to express my worldview now. Like, I feel stifled and horrible. And those things are real feelings. But yeah, but if you can slow down and really anchor things in your body, that you can have a much more, well, let's just say, a more intelligent response to all of that, and then figure out a way for Pluto to then turn into a source of empowerment in
Exactly.
the third house, right? That then your voice becomes empowered. And because Mars is up there in the ninth house, that's one of the sort of outward community focused houses, right? So it's taking action in the external world as a response to that feeling of, oh, so I think I really like this, and I have a good friend of this, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly where this is.
I'm having the same thought. This
Yeah.
is my daughter's, and I know
Cool.
exactly how this is playing out, and it's really interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating to see these things. Okay, let's
Yeah.
move on
Nice.
then to folks who have Capricorn rising.
Okay, for those of you with Capricorn rising, you have Taurus in the fifth house. And during this Taurus season, with the sun in Taurus, that's what is being brought to your attention, your fifth house considerations. So the fifth house is essentially the place where you give love, where you give of yourself. And you would do that because you just love doing it. So that's the core essence of the fifth house. Now, how that plays out is it can play out in playfulness, risk taking. It might play out in relationships you have with little children, your own or someone else's. It also could play out in places where you just create. You're creative, you're an artist, and you do these big canvases, or you do something else. Like that's also a fifth house piece. So it's a place where you might be, hopefully you're enjoying yourself. I mean, that's really the key piece, the house of joy and pleasure here. So that's what Taurus season brings to you. And it's really saying that there's a source of stability through those pieces, like playfulness and risk taking, actually, ironically, brings you this sense of tranquility and peace here in the fifth house. So that's what is always being illuminated for you during this time. But Mars is also in this chart. Mars is in Leo, it's in your eighth house, and it is opposing Pluto, as we talked about at length in the beginning of this video. So that is placing some stress on all of this. And for you, the stress has to do with your second and eighth houses, which are, in a nutshell, both about resources. The eighth house is about other people's stuff, other people's resources, or connections with money, or their own set of values, and you having to kind of deal with whatever their own connection is to their resources. So that's a lot of what the eighth house is about. And Mars opposed Pluto really represents something that feels wild and dangerous and out of control and maybe destructive, and that you may feel like, oh my god, I don't have any control over my finances or other people's money. Like there's nothing I can do. Like it has this real tone of like, huh, to it. But at this time, what is being asked of you is something a bit different. Like with Mars in the eighth house, it might be really easy to be pissed off and like bite someone's head off over something, or to be destructive in some other way that has to do with their resources. But instead of acting out and acting in such a manner, what really needs to be done is that you slow down. And Mars is in Leo, so it's looking at the sun. The sun rules Leo, so it's looking at the sun going, hey, how do I do this? How do I do Mars things? And the sun is saying you need to calm down and need to anchor yourself in creative processes. You need to anchor yourself in love, essentially, before you take action, before you know how to act with this, whatever this issue is around other people's money that might involve your own resources. So that really is essentially it. And with Taurus in the fifth house, I mean, there is a profound ability to love here. There's a profound ability to do that. So I like it.
It's really interesting. As you're talking about it, I'm thinking about, with Mars going into that eighth house, like there might be the tendency to, I'm going to set these boundaries, I'm going to set these strong boundaries. Somebody's trying to take my money away from me, or, something along those lines. And it might not have anything to do with money, but something in that realm of resources and value, something that you value, that you may feel like you're going to lose something of great value. And when Mars moves in there, there's this tendency to, I'm going to set these boundaries, I'm going to force this thing. And it's like, well, you may have to do exactly that, but you need to slow down, gather your own creative resources around you in order to understand how to set those boundaries in a healthy way.
Yeah. No, I like it's like setting the boundary from a place of loving your loving nature. I don't mean pushover. I just mean from that place of no, this is what I need to do from a space of love. And that boundary might be intense, but knowing where it comes from instead of just doing it without thinking about it. That's what we're asking, or well, not we, but this astrology setup is asking for.
So, yeah, spend extra time doing your creative endeavors,
Hmm.
whether they are painting, playing the tabla. I am speaking to someone specific with that statement. And it will help you understand how to manage boundaries between yourself and your own values, other people's resources, etc.
Hmm.
Fascinating. Okay, let's move on to folks who have Aquarius rising. So if you've got Aquarius rising, Taurus is your fourth house. Every Taurus season, your fourth house is lit up. The fourth house is your home, your family, your roots, the land you live on, all of that. Your ancestral line. There's a lot in the fourth house. But for people with Aquarius rising, this is an area that they really want stability. These are people who, maybe a little quirky on the outside, interesting people. When it comes to their home and family, they are stable and rooted. So that's where the focus is at this point in time. However, we've included Mars here because Mars is in a very close square aspect to the sun, just as the sun steps into Taurus, and it is asking for action. It's saying, I need to take action. There's some incredible stress between my personality, who I am, because Pluto is relatively newly in Aquarius, opposing that Mars. So there is something that feels out of control regarding how I express my own personality and my relationships. So there's some way in which I'm ready to, you know, end the marriage or have a battle with a partner or whatever that might be in the seventh house. And yet Mars is saying, okay, before I blow up the bridge, what do I do? It's asking the sun because the sun is the ruler of Leo, where Mars is. So it's asking the sun, what do I do? And basically, the message here to me is loud and clear. Take your shoes off and go for a walk in the woods where you live, ground yourself, make a meal for your family, do something in terms of really stabilizing your roots in your home and in your family. And from that stable place, figure out a conscious way to deal with this difficulty that doesn't include, blowing anything up.
Yeah. Yeah, I get a real visual image with this one of just like really grounding in your body, like taking that time to yourself, making sure you take a little bit of retreat time to really anchor deeply into your body. And again, this also again brings up the whole somatic experiencing thing for me of just really understanding what's happening to your nervous system. Where do you feel kind of frazzled, and where can you just say, all right, I need to set that aside and just do what's right for me so that I can feel profoundly anchored in my own roots. And from that place, you are unshakable in how you connect with other people. And then you'll know exactly what decision to make. And maybe it's, time to have some really great sex. I mean, right? I mean, with Mars in your seventh house, like, great. You're not gonna, that's what you want to do. You're not going to lose anything by that because you're so anchored in your roots. So that's kind of, it's sort of like warning you against super rash action, getting in touch with yourself. And then, you're sort of freeing yourself to take up a really excitable, enthusiastic action with Mars
Yeah.
and Leo. Yeah,
Yeah, which could certainly be. Yeah. I mean, Mars always can bring in those ideas or, yeah, many others.
many others, but that's I like
That's a
that one.
good way to use it for sure. Okay, so let's move on to folks who have Pisces rising.
Okay, so those of you with Pisces rising, Taurus season, where the sun is in this chart, is in your third house. So this is lighting up your third house of communication. This house summarizes your interactions with people like your neighbors, your siblings, your local environment. This also is, the place of transportation, like maybe you're riding the bus or maybe you're riding your bike or whatever. That's what the Taurus sun always brings up. And because you have Taurus here, there's something very physical about your communication style. There's something very tangible and practical in the way that you choose to deliver your messages, essentially. So that's what Taurus season is lighting up. It always lights this part of your chart up. But this Taurus season is different than others in the fact that Mars is in Leo, and we put Mars in the chart. It's in your sixth house, and it's in a pretty tight square to the sun. And furthermore, it's been in an opposition with Pluto, which we talked about at length in the beginning of this video. So where Mars is a place that's requesting action in your life. But before we talk about what that is, what we really need to address is that Mars opposed Pluto is a place that feels out of control for all of us. It's bigger than all of us. It's kind of has this freight train feeling to it. And for you, that's falling in your sixth and your 12th houses. So that's something to do with your routines and your spiritual beliefs or your physical health and your mental spiritual health, or the way you kind of make money through your livelihood versus your very intangible imaginative life. So that's the axis that's being lit up that, maybe feel pretty out of control. I mean, Pluto moving into your 12th house, as it did a little while ago, really is a force that's stirring up your subconscious processes or unconscious processes, I should probably say. And with Mars opposing it, you probably feel really like, oh, I need to do something about this. I've got to immediately take some sort of action that has to do with my regular routines. And while that's true, the square from Mars to the sun really brings in the idea that Mars needs to ask the sun, what do I need to do? And the sun is in Taurus. And so the sun is saying, you need to chill out. You need to slow down. You need to not be rash. You need to just relax and, take a minute and really get into your body, and understand what that feels like. And then from that feeling, make a decision about something you need to change in your lifestyle. I think it's that.
And I think the action, all I can think as you're talking about it is the action is, you go into that place, you stabilize that third house, you stabilize your voice, and then you use your voice in a daily routine manner. Maybe this is a time to really start a important writing practice, something along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's one
something
way.
where you express yourself, right?
Yeah, some way of expressing yourself. And, it may be, bringing that expression to the neighborhood, the siblings, the third house type relationships. but it's a powerful time for all of us, isn't it?
Yes, and you know what I just thought of too, Lori, with the whole third house, sixth house. This might be a time to try an improv class. This might be time to just try something that shakes up your routines. It's about how you express yourself and be brave and bold and expressing yourself in a new way that incorporates maybe a little more fun, a little more spice into your daily life. That might be part of what's happening
And
here.
allowing that newly that subconscious or unconscious part of you that is newly just trying to develop more power to
Yeah.
allow that to come out through stories, through improv, whatever, through your voice.
Yeah, and then it stabilizes your voice because you've got Taurus there, and that's you have a ability to do that. So, yeah, that's interesting. But you're right. There's a lot going on in the world, and this is it impacts all of us differently. And
Yes.
you know,
It's fascinating. Okay, Jenny, I think we are done with this video.
yes,
I hope those of you are watching, if anyone's still watching, I hope you've been watching our series that we've started on interesting people. Who have we covered so far?
we've covered what's his name?
47.
47. And we've covered Cory Booker, and we have one coming out today on AOC, and there'll be more
Yeah,
to come.
yeah, there will be more to come. And please let us know who you want us to look at.
Great.
And thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Lori.
Bye-bye.